Okay, so let's discuss, first of all, the present, I guess, and the reality of where both these clubs are. Obviously, Tottenham started well, and then back-to-back 3-0 losses. And Arsenal, we know the story, of course, about how Arteta is still looking to find the right formula. I guess my first question is to both of you is, which set of supporters should be the most worried when it comes to the state of their respective clubs? Let's begin with you, James. What do you think?
So I think in the short term, I mean, I'll let Jack take the lead on Tottenham. He knows them much better than I. In the short term, there's cause to be worried about Arsenal in that they may not get the results that a team of their standard expects. There are not world-class players dotted across this team, as there were maybe only 5 years ago when you had players like Sanchez, Ozil, even Laurent Koscielny. This is it's a team that is starting something afresh and that has been putting that off for too long, giving out big money to players in the hope that they could get them across the line from 5th to 4th and that everything could start again with Champions League money. So right now, combined 11s don't have a great history in the North London derby. They can certainly backfire, but I think if you were doing one, you would say that the current talent, it's really heavily towards Spurs, I would say, with the likes of Kane, Son, even someone like Højbjerg in midfield. But at least with Arsenal, there's a sense that the future might be bright, that there's a real plan for something, that they've obviously spent £150 million in the summer on players who are all younger than 23, that they hope will grow together. The initial signs are mostly pretty promising, from Ramsdale, White, people like Gabriel they bought before, and obviously Bukayo Saka and Emile Smith-Rowe. That's where you're feeling positive about Arsenal's future. But this is a Arsenal Football Club, isn't it? The future is only good enough for so much, and fans of this team rightly expect progress in the present that hasn't always been apparent yet.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with James that Tottenham's situation looks rosier right now than Arsenal's. Clearly, they have lots of high-level players at the moment, even if that's not always immediately apparent watching them play. But Kane, Son, Ndombele, Lo Celso, Dyer, Lloris, these are experienced guys who have played to a high level for a while. In terms of future prospects, I think one advantage that Tottenham have over Arsenal is probably expertise. I think we can't really have any trust at all, unfortunately, in the Arsenal board to want to win, to know how to win, to push in the right direction. The Tottenham board divides fans, certainly, and Daniel Levy, I think, is, there's lots of legitimate criticisms to be made of Daniel Levy, but I do think he has the interest of Tottenham more at heart than the Cronkies do with Arsenal. And I think that in Fabio Paratici, the new managing director of football who arrived this summer, Tottenham have someone with more expertise about how to build a winning club than, say, an equivalent figure at Arsenal. I mean, Edu comes in with, his own track record at Brazil, but he's got a fairly questionable time at the club so far. So I'd say Spurs fans could be slightly more optimistic. That said, clearly the situation of both clubs is worse than it was a few years ago. And making that gap up to the richer teams like City and Liverpool and Chelsea and Manchester United is a big job.
So staying with that in the search of the trajectory, so to speak, what would you say, the importance, I guess, and probability of reaching Europe? Obviously, still early in the season. We're only talking in September, but as we look to see other clubs that are looking to break in as well and climb up that table, James, and again, Jack, obviously as well, from a Tottenham perspective, what's the importance and probability, do you think, of Arsenal at this point reaching Europe?
It's a fiddly one with the league, because if you look at it logically, they've really only lost 3 points you might have expected them to get at home to Brentford. I mean, the way they lost to City and Chelsea was really dispiriting for their fans, but all their fans went into it not expecting to win. The one thing I would say that I think is very much in Arsenal's favour is they are a good cup team. I don't know what it is about this club, because I think it goes beyond Arteta, goes beyond a lot of these players. I think there's maybe something cultural, and a lot of this can be wishy-washy about how these players just about switch on when it really matters. They tend to turn it around, and they've been to Europa League final, the Europa League semi-final last year, consistent winners of the FA Cup. It looks like Arteta will take the League Cup seriously, because I'm sure he's looking at the trips Jack has got ahead of him in the Europa Conference League and thinking, Yes, get me some of that. Get me Ren away. I think 5th or 6th is a ambitious but potentially achievable goal in the league. But I still think for them, I think they will be one of the better forces in the cup, not least with the FA Cup. The team should be a little bit more settled and gelled, and they should know each other better by January.
As you answer this question, Jack, what are Tottenham supporters feeling about just the Conference League as well, being part, obviously? I mean, they are technically in Europe, but how much of a value are they seeing in this tournament?
And Jack, I just remind you that the Conference League is available on Paramount Plus to watch, so please tell everyone how to
James gets his bonus right there because of that statement. Well done, my friend.
I think Tottenham fans are fairly enthusiastic about the competition, to be honest, just because it's football. I'm sure that, the atmosphere was great at the Paços de Ferreira game. It wasn't full, but the fans who were there were really into it, and I'm sure that will improve over the course of the group stage. My impression, frankly, is that the club is more engaged in Spurs' participation in the Conference League than Nuno is himself. I think from Nuno's perspective, it's just extra games that are distracting him from the Premier League, whereas for the club, it's an opportunity to fill the stadium up every other week, to bring money in that way, to grow the brand of the club and get those delicious UEFA coefficient points. So I think the club cares more about it than Nuno does. I think the fans are probably more on the enthusiastic side. In terms of the question of Europe for next year, I think Spurs can probably come 5th if they play well. I think that's probably their ceiling for this year, just because City, Chelsea, Liverpool, and Manchester United are much better than them. But I wonder, like James, whether the cups might be a better solution come the end of the season if they don't have the consistency in the league.
Right. And okay, so let's shift it a little bit here and specifically focus on the managers. On one side, you got Mikel Arteta, a former player, obviously been there for a little bit while. Nuno Espirito Santo, in many ways, has come as out of nowhere, right? Because obviously Antonio Conte was in discussions, and there was a piece as well from the Telegraph, I believe, on Paulo Fonseca. Just so many narratives this summer on who was going to take over. Nuno Espirito Santo came into the beginning of it. So, Jack, let's stick with you for a second. Thoughts on Nuno Espirito Santo so far? Is he the man to elevate, take the club? You mentioned, obviously, that he's not that bothered, or at least as focused in the Conference League as I guess he would be FA Cup, League Cup, etc. What are your makings of Nuno?
I think he's got a really hard job. I think that job is made harder by the fact that everyone knows he was Tottenham's 8th, 9th, 10th choice this summer. Tottenham initially rejected him when he left Wolves, and then came back to him when they'd gone through almost every other available candidate, and then decided that maybe Nuno is the right choice after all. It's also been tough because of the Harry Kane situation trying to leave, and Ndombele trying to leave, Paratici coming in, questions about transfer budgets and all the rest of it. So it has been really tough for him. Honestly, I think it's far too early to judge in terms of results or style of play. We've seen some games where Tottenham played pretty boringly and won 1-0. We've seen games where Tottenham was sensational in the first half against Chelsea and lost 3-0. They were awful against Palace and lost 3-0. So I think at this stage, not just a season, but a managerial tenure in which there have been so many other extenuating circumstances, not to mention the Dubrovnik three South American players who went on a nice little Adriatic holiday to avoid mandatory hotel quarantine this month. It's just I just think that Nuno has had so much stuff to deal with that it's been very, very difficult for him. And right now, even though I think Tottenham are not playing well yet, I do think it is too early to judge.
It's so odd that we basically end up saying this about every new manager who comes into his job, or has done basically since the end of 2019. You kind of have to go, I have no frame of reference for anything that he's been through. Right. I mean, I have this with Arteta, and I still think we all forget it's not just the COVID pandemic. You go right back to March of last year. He was the first high profile victim of COVID in the United Kingdom. Yeah. And I mean, this was, we were all in the press conference with him a day before the pre-Man City press conference, a day before it was announced he had COVID. Bizarre. I just remember ringing up sort of comms people at Arsenal going, do you think I have COVID? That maybe gives you a sense of how, Arteta's had many of these similar challenges, but he has now had the time that means that someone's going to judge you anyway, and it might end up being premature, and it might be not reflective of your potential abilities as a manager, but you've been in the job nearly 2 years.
I think that's my point. The fact that, this is it's not a resume, or at least it's not an example of work that's been 5 months long. It's been 2 years. And not to say that, Arsenal cannot climb up the table more and get Europe, etc. But we do have a little bit more, I guess, of what Arteta has been doing at Arsenal, regardless of what that is. Nuno Espirito Santo, I just rely more on his work with Wolves, I guess, right? And how in many ways he's kind of a reactive manager, right? He counters, he sits, he waits. With Wolves, he waited a little bit with Raúl Jiménez and Traoré to make sure that they push and aggressive. And then, as you mentioned, Jack, in that first half against Chelsea, they were pressing and then they sat. So I guess he's still trying to figure it out. Here's my question to both of you. James, if Arteta were to leave, would you have somebody else that you would think this is the person that can truly help Arsenal?
The club as a whole.
Let me put another part to that question. Are you hopeful that Arteta is still the man to continue to lead Arsenal? And if he isn't, who would be the person?
Arsenal desperately are. I mean, don't forget, a year ago, Vinay Venkatesham was saying to us all on a conference call, he was saying, I can't imagine Mikel Arteta not being Arsenal manager, when he just promoted him after 6 good months of work. If you're looking for... The club needs someone like Antonio Conte to come in. I don't know if he'd take the job, and I don't think Arsenal would particularly want him and his borderline psychotic standards and willingness to fight with anyone. I mean, it's the antithesis of everything Arsenal are about, and therefore it's probably what they need right now. I don't really think many great managers would want the job as is.
I think with Tottenham it's slightly different, because there is a popular candidate waiting in the wings, so to speak, and that's Mauricio Pochettino. Pochettino was very, very tempted to come back to Tottenham in the summer. The reason he didn't is because of PSG. It's not because of him. Tottenham fans would love this. I don't know how plausible it is this season. One, obviously, because he's at PSG and he would have to get fired to be able to take the job. Also, I'm not sure how much it would fit with the new Paratici model. The idea was for Pochettino to come in before Paratici came in. Now that Paratici's in charge, I'm not sure whether he would want Pochettino. So I'm not that confident that it will happen, but that's clearly what Spurs fans think. And there is a general sense that because Nuno's only got this 2-year deal, that they might well see this as a transitional season and try and go for somebody a bit more ambitious in the next summer, whether that's Pochettino or going back to one of the guys they also looked at last summer, like a Graham Potter or an Eric Ten Hag. We'll just have to wait and see.